All right, can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Cool. All right, so get your lab stuff. We're not going to do any Kahoots today because we got a lot of stuff to do in the lab to do our end-to-end. So I'm going to go through the lecture, like the content real quick, and then we'll do that. But in the meantime, get your broken web app and your Kali machine up and running and logged in. And I'm going to start talking. All right, so. Nope, that's not what I wanted. All right. So we are talking about the subdomain 14, and then we'll also do subdomain 15. Subdomain 15 is super quick, and it is also pretty much common sense, I'd say, but this is about the regulations and policies that are related to the CEH. So this represents, I think, about 2% of your exam. So, you know, you'll get a couple questions about on there specifically about things like, for example, compliance like Hipaa or PCI or Sarbanes-Oxley. So you should just know, you know, about the different policies. You don't need to know specifically what they do other than, for example, the Hipaa is about healthcare, Sarbanes-Oxley is financials, PCI is about credit cards, payment cards. So, I mean, that's pretty much all you need to know, specifically other than, you know, organizations have to abide by those policies. So for security policies specifically, we're talking about, oh, sorry, I didn't realize that you guys couldn't. All right, so security policies, we're talking about statement of intention with regard to resources of a business. It defines what a company considers to be security. So how do you know when you've got enough security, or how do you know when you've got enough protection, when your risks are minimized and or mitigated? Joe, your background is super cool. So common security policies, access control, information security policies, information protection policies, passwords and email policies, and information audit policies. You'll see a lot of these probably if you are working in any place that has something to do with computers. You might also see, for example, like acceptable use policies, for example. So you should just know these different types of policies. I don't recall seeing anything specific about these on the exam. So you should just know that these are different types of policies. All right, so access control. So this identifies the resources that need protection and the rules in place to control access to those resources. So the beginning place for anyone who's doing anything in cybersecurity is just to have an idea of what the assets are within your domain. So making sure that you have a good, inventory list of the assets that are on your machine. Don't get caught slipping where you've got like, a whole row of computers that you didn't know about that are still connected to the internet, because that could be a vulnerability. So you would have a complete inventory if you were doing, for example, penetration testing on your environment. But if you're charged with protecting it, you should actually know what it is that you need to protect. So information security policy. So identifies to employees what systems may be used for. So this is like the same as like an acceptable use, what they cannot be used for, and what are the consequences for breaking the rules. So again, if there are not consequences for breaking the rules and anybody's just going to do whatever, and versions of this are known as the acceptable use. So you're generally required to sign something before you can start accessing resources. And then if you violate them, you're not going to be able to. Now, most organizations will have something like, for example, a proxy in place to prevent you from breaking some security controls. So like if they say, hey, we don't want you going to Facebook, they'll make it so you can't go to Facebook, but then you shouldn't circumvent those, proxies to be able to go and access it anyway. So information protection policy defines information sensitivity level. So we're talking about, for example, whether it's classified or sensitive or top secret or whatever the classification level for the information that your organization use, this should be described in the information protection policy. Also a password policy. So this should say something about how long your password should be, the amount of complexity, whether you allow certain characters. Some people will allow, for example, all the special characters. Some places will say, none of the ones that are allowed can usually be used to access databases. So, you may see some that say, hey, no @ or no $signs or no underscores. So you have to define what the level of complexity is for your organization. Oh, and then how often you're supposed to be resetting your password. So email policy. So this addresses the appropriate use of company email. But some of this is just common sense, not sending things throughout your email that you don't want read, because all of that information is being scanned and popping up somewhere in a system somewhere. So you want to make sure that, anything that you wouldn't want your mother seeing, that you're not emailing. Information audit policy, which defines the framework for auditing the security within the organization. So, how often are you doing audits? So some organizations have audit requirements that are specified by law, like if you're a financial organization, healthcare organizations. But if not, your information audit policy should define how frequently you should be getting audited. And audit is basically just checking to make sure that whatever it is that you said that you're supposed to be doing for your organization, that you're actually doing it. Are you following your policies and procedures? Are you doing what it is that you're supposed to be doing, or what you said you're going to do? So there's different types of policies. There's promiscuous, permissive, prudent, and paranoid. So you want to try to find somewhere in between here, in between this range. You don't want to necessarily have a paranoid policy, which is, my password is 50 characters long and no one knows it. So you can't even like log on to anything, but you don't want to be like, I have no password and everybody can just log on, So you want to have some good mix in between promiscuous and paranoid. And that should be, defined for your organization. So HIPAA, when we're talking about compliance, this is one of the, I think, 3 big ones that you need to make sure that you know. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. This regulates the protection of healthcare information. So when we're talking about PII normally, when we're talking about healthcare, it's PHI, which is protected health information. Okay, so this tells us how you have to keep people's electronic medical records, how you have to protect their information. Anything that's protected information from a healthcare standard is covered under HIPAA. So you can probably get away with, for the purposes of your exam, just knowing that HIPAA is for healthcare. And there are different rules that deal with electronic transactions, code sets, privacy, security, national identifier, whether or not you're supposed to be using someone's social security number as a key or a record within your databases, and then enforcement, what happens if you're not following these rules. Okay, so it used to be that everything was stored by people's social security numbers. Well, that's awesome, because if you get access to it, then you get everyone's social security numbers. So now they have to have another identifier besides a social security number in order to be able to protect the social security number if it should be, if it's breached. So Sarbanes-Oxley. So this is a big deal if you're in the public sector and you're dealing with things that are financial. It was created to make corporate disclosures more accurate and reliable. Some organizations that are larger may decide that, hey, we don't want to tell anybody that we've had a breach. We don't want to tell anyone that something happened. So Sarbanes-Oxley kind of prevents that from happening. It makes sure that, for example, your audit people cannot actually be the same people who are implementing the system. So there has to be independence. It helps to enforce corporate responsibility, basically common sense things. But it just makes sure that everything's on the up and up, and it's required by law. And if you don't, abide by it, then, there are consequences. So you should just know that you'll probably see something that says SOX. So it may not actually tell you that it's Sarbanes-Oxley, but this is what SOX is. So you may see that, as an acronym. You should just know that this deals with financial information. So PCI, so this is about payment card. Anyone who deals with, for example, credit cards, ATM cards, other point of sale cards or transactions have to abide by PCI. So similar to, Hipaa for healthcare and Sarbanes-Oxley for financial data, payment card instructs how you're supposed to store the information. That specifically if you're storing people's credit card information, that you have to maintain a firewall configuration to protect the data, that you have to remove vendor supplied default passwords. But, of course, this is just good cybersecurity common sense things. Encrypting transmission of cardholder data. Is it encrypted in transmission, or is it just encrypted at rest? How's that information going to be transmitted, and how is it protected when it's at rest? So those are considerations that you have to deal with when we're talking about the PCI. And there's also like a need to know, like most things, if you don't need to have access to the database, the credit card information in there, then, you probably shouldn't. Okay. So that's what PCI is. So again, you should just know that it has to do with payment cards. You may just see PCI DSS, but just know that that's for credit cards. All right, so COVID. So this is the control objects for information related technology. And this is an IT governance framework supporting tool sets that allow managers to bridge the gap between the requirements, technical issues, and business risks. Okay, so this enables you to be able to do policy development and helps you to develop good practice. Okay, so this was created by our kind friends over in the audit world. And it's meant one of the things for risk and compliance that you have to deal with. So this has specific domains in planning, organization, acquisition, implementation, delivery and support, and monitoring and evaluation. So you may see something about this. You should just know that this has to do with governance framework, and this is regulated by ASACA. All right, and then you have ISO 27001. You may see this specifically, something asking about the ISO 27001. I remember seeing something about this, so you should just know that this is specifically about providing compliance regulations for information security systems. So it's a standard that addresses issues such as ensuring compliance and laws, as well as formulating internal security requirements and objectives. Okay, so you should just know if you see ISO 27001, and ISO is the International Standards Organization. So this is a international policy as opposed to a national policy. Okay, so when we're talking about, for example, like NIST, NIST is something that's specific to the United States. ISO is specific to, internationally. All right, so that is it for the first part of 16. The other part we're going to do is the ethics and compliance, but as promised, that will be super short. This is it, I think. Yes. So two things you should know about this as far as your exam. There's usually this is only 2% of your exam. It's probably only going to literally be maybe 2 questions out of the 100 or so that you're going to have. And it's basically all common sense. Okay. Keep private information private. Keep confidential information confidential. Don't transmit, sell, or give any personal information to another person. Protect the intellectual property of another of the people that you're looking at. Disclose vulnerabilities. Okay, so don't find the vulnerability and then sell it as a 0-day on the black market. Don't use software that's unethically or illegally obtained. So, actually, if you're using, for example, Nessus in your business, you should probably pay for Nessus, not just getting it for, free, like I have been known to do. Don't engage in deceptive financial practices like bribery or double billing or improper financial practices. Add to the knowledge of your profession and share your experience with fellow EC council members. So it has a kind of like, each one teach one kind of clause as a part of the CEH exam. And then, of course, conducting yourself in an ethical manner. So with anything that has to do with ethical hacking, you want to make sure that you have written permission. Verbal permission is not enough. Written permission that says that you're supposed to do it. You want to stay within the scope of your activity, and evidence of illegal activity should be reported. Again, you shouldn't use it for blackmail. All right, and that is literally it for the ethics and the professional code of conduct. So as promised, that was relatively quick because we're going to probably need most of the time to do our end-to-end. So are you guys ready with your labs? And if you need a copy of this is on the website, blackgirlshack.org /CEH. You'll find a walkthrough on there about what we're doing. It's week 16. I also added some of the missing labs in. So if you have not caught up, you can. I think there's still 2 more I need to do, but it's just basically going to do the same types of web things. All right, so we're going to log into our, passwords. You want to make sure that you have connectivity as usual. And we're going to do, we're not going to do the reconnaissance because we already know, but we're going to start off with figuring out, we're not going to do like the social engineering or any of that stuff, but we're going to start off with the scanning up and enumeration. Okay. So what we're going to do, make sure that you have your Windows, your Kali box, and your Broken Web App up. If you've got memory issues, you can get away with just having the Kali and the Broken Web App up. You need a minimum of those 2. So ping your Broken Web App and just make sure that you can connect to it from both the machines so that you can ensure that you have connectivity. All right, so the first thing you're going to do in our end-to-end process is you're going to do an Nmap scan. So we're going to do an Nmap to see what's available on the network. So I'm going to say Nmap. First, I want to say ifconfig. So when I say ifconfig, it tells me that the IP address for this machine is 10.0.2.1. So we're going to send a, 2.7. So we're going to send a, do a scan of the network. And we're going to use the IP address for the domain controller for that. So we're going to say nmap 10.0.2.1/24. So what this is going to do is this is going to scan the entire network for us. So in my case right now, I only have my Broken Web App and my Kali machine up. But you'll see in the write-up that I provided to you when I did this, that there were, all of the machines were up. So you'll see, for example, 10.0.2.1, which is my domain controller, which just has my DNS on it. And then you'll see for my Broken Web App, it has 9 services that are open on various ports. And then you'll see for my Windows machine, it has several services open as well. This is actually my Kali machine. I think 10.7 is my Windows machine. So you actually don't see any thing open for Windows. But right now we're just going to be attacking our broken web app. All right, so any questions so far? No? All right, so when we did this, we see a couple of things, okay? So we see 10.0.2.1, which again is our domain controller. We see our machine that we're on here is 10.0.2.14, and there's some other things that are up on here, but we don't necessarily care about those. I think 7 is, let me see. 7 is me, okay. But what we're going to be attacking is our Kali machine. So I'm sorry, is our broken web app machine. So that's the one we're going to care about, which is 14. So we see that there are 9 services open. There's SSH, there's 80, which is HTTP, and then there's a whole bunch of other ones, okay? So each one of these represents a source of vulnerabilities for us to be able to get into the system, okay? So if you're following along, we're on, sorry. We're going to do a scan of 14 with our broken web app, okay? So now that we've scanned the network, we found out which machines are within the network. I'm telling you that within scope right now, we're looking at the Windows machine and the Kali machine, okay? So now we're going to do a scan of our Nmap scan of our broken web app. So we're going to say Nmap-A. So I'm not going to do a -A right now because I want you guys to know what it's going to look like on your actual exam. So we're going to say, we're going to do a stealth exam, which is going to be SS, okay? And then we're going to say we want it to be relatively slow. So we're going to say T3. So this is a scale from 0 to 5, where 5 is the fastest and 0 is the slowest. We're going to need the version information for the machine, and then we need the IP address. So this is 10.0.2.14. which is my Kali machine, okay? So on your exam, you're gonna see specific information about if you wanted to send a stealth, then how would you do that? If you wanted to, send it quicker, you would do like T5 as opposed to T3 or as opposed to T0. And if you don't specify, then the default is, I think, T4. So we're gonna do the scan here. The other thing that you should remember, just as while this Nmap scan is running, is if we're going to do a ping of our broken web app, if we want to send exactly 3 pings, you would say nmap-ping.c 10.0.2.14. This sends exactly, sorry, it's not C. Oh, it is .c, but I have to say I want to send exactly 3. So if you say -c, it sends exactly 3 pings, okay? So if I were to just say ping 10.0.2.14 and let it go, it would send, I have to type it correctly though. It would sing all the pings. It would keep going forever and ever and always, and it wouldn't stop, okay? So if you only wanted to send ping, so the more that you send, the more likely it's going to get picked up by your friendly neighborhood firewall or your security professional who's listening on the other end. So in this case, we're doing this on our personal networks. So it doesn't necessarily matter, but for your test, again, you should know that if you want to specify exactly how many, either through hping or through ping, that it's -c if you're on a Linux machine, and it's -n if you're on the Windows machine. Okay, so you may see a question about that on your exam. All right, so our scan has completed. So now that our scan has completed, we can see exactly what services are available on here. So we knew that there were 9 ports open. We knew what services were on there, but we didn't know the version, okay? So now we can see OpenSSH, which is version 5.3. We see there's an Apache server, which is 2.214, a Samba server, and so on. So me personally, just because I'm doing this in order, we're going to start and try to, we're going to break in using port 22, and then I'm going to show you how you can also break in via port 80. But the reality is that when we do the vulnerability scan, I'm going to show you how to do that in a second, using Nmap, you're going to see that there are literally, I think there's hundreds of vulnerabilities on this broken web app machine. So any number of those can be used. I wouldn't suggest doing a DDoS on your own home network. I actually ran a Java program yesterday that had a while loop that never ended, and it literally crashed my computer, and I was sad. So, you don't want to, for example, DDoS yourself and then, end up with a crashed computer. And all right, so let's see, where were we at? So we did our version. And I was supposed to do operating -O as well. -O is for the operating system. We know that because we set this up that the operating system is Linux, but Nmap will give you its best guess as to what operating system it is. And the best guess will be like it's a Linux kernel. So it may say, hey, this is Debian, or hey, this may be, whatever version of Linux that you have, but it'll tell you whatever the best guess is. But you should just know the -O, and it's a big O, not a little o, for your exam in case it wants to know, how to do an operating system. And if you get a question like this that says, hey, how do we do all of these? The -A, which is the aggressive scan, gives you everything. Okay, but you should know the flags. If nothing else that you know for this exam, you should know some ports and you should know some flags. All right, so we have all of our services are available on here. We knew that there were 9 of them on here, so we're going to get access through the port 22. Okay, so in order for us to be able to do this, we have to get access the internet so that we can get something. I have already done that for you so that you can see what it looks like. But if you need to do this, you're going to have to connect your Kali machine, not your broken web app, to the internet. You're going to use this command here to go and get the Nmap scanning engine, and then you need to run this command. Okay, so when you do that, you can actually be able to run the Nmap vulnerability scan. So there are other ways to do a vulnerability scan. So again, we've talked in the past in some of the past labs about using Nessus or OpenBOS. There are a lot of different ways. Nmap is usually convenient. It's because Nmap is almost always installed on the machine, and you just have to get the scripting engine. So to do this, we say Nmap SV. So what this is going to do is get us the version of the, which we already know, the version of all of the things that are the services that are on here. And then it's specifically going to tell us the vulnerabilities. So this is actually going to take a little while to run. But what it's going to do, you'll see at the bottom of your document, you may be wondering to yourself, why is this document 68 pages? At the end, I've included for your browsing pleasure all of the vulnerabilities, or a partial list of all of the vulnerabilities that are on your broken web app machine. Each one of these represents something that you can use to try to do an exploit. And then I'm also provided all of the vulnerabilities that are specifically on, I think it's port 80. So one of the first 2 things that I always do, actually the first thing I probably do is try to exploit a web server, just because I'm more familiar with like web application security. But the second thing that I would do is maybe SSH. But if you see something on there, like for example, like FTP or SMB, those things make me excited because those are generally easy ways to get into a system. But we don't have FTP or SMP, so we're going to start off using SSH. So I just added my name so I could just jump back to where I was at. All right, so we're running the vulnerability scan. So when it does that, let's see, did it come back with, it did not, unable to split mask. I will check this. I copied and pasted this last night when this works, so it may just be because I'm not connected to the internet right now. But it goes and it gets all of the vulnerability information, and again, it's pasted at the bottom of your screen so you can see. Okay, so we're going to try to first get in using SSH. But then there are a lot of other ways. Any of these open services represent a a possibility for us to be able to get in. So I'm going to show you specifically how to get in through port 22 and port 80, but you can see that these are just, you know, maybe 2 or 3 of the probably endless ways that you can be able to break into this list, okay, into this user account. So what we're going to do first is we're going to try to SSH in, but we need to make a user list, okay? So you may not know this, but in Kali, there is a lot of word lists and user password lists that are on here. So we're going to say copy user share word lists. It's supposed to be USR share word list Metasploit. And I think it's called root user pass, and we're going to copy that into user pass.txt. Okay, so what that's going to do, if I say cat user pass, that's going to give me all of the default root username and passwords for Linux machines. Okay, so these are typical root passwords. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through this list and we're going to replace all of the instances of root, because we want to try to log in as a user first, because we're following the ethical hacking process, which is basically try to gain access through a user account and then escalate your privileges to a administrator account and then, you know, cover your tracks. Okay, so we're going to go through the user pass.txt file, and everywhere it says the word root, this is just going to replace. So it's going to go through everywhere it sees the word root, it's going to replace it with the word user in our file. Okay. Let's see, what did I do? Unknown character. I imagine something got in here. Expression character unknown command. Sed -I user pass.txt. Expression unknown command. All right, I'm not going to, let me see if I have the other one. Let me just make sure I had this command correctly. This worked yesterday. There's another way. VI. All right, so I'm just going to VI into user pass, and then I'm going to say colon and paste this. And I'm going to replace all of the root with user globally. So, and it's doing all just one. Bar. Oh, that's all in the current file. Okay, so I need to do a and a that. And it needs to be user. All right, that worked. So you can say colon WQ to get out of there, and then that gives us all of the username and passwords. So now we're going to go into Metasploit. So we're going to say MSF console. But you should just make sure that you are currently in your root folder. That's where I'm operating. If not, you need to figure out where you're operating from so you can use that in Metasploit. So we're going to say MSF console. So it kicks off our friendly neighborhood Metasploit framework. And we're going to say that we want to use, so specifically, we're going to use SSH, which is the port that we're using to try to break in right now. We're going to use that. Oh, I'm sorry. You need to say specifically use this. So when you do that, it'll operate, and then you want to say show options. So when it does that, it gives you a whole bunch of, let me just make this bigger so you can see it. So it gives you a whole bunch of options, okay? So what we want to say is that we want to set the user pass file, and we just made it so it's root user pass.txt. We want to say stop on success is yes. We're going to say set our host into 10.0.2.14, which is the IP address for my broken web app machine. So that, and I think that's the only thing that's required. We have the port, we have the stop on success, and we set everything else. So normally you can say check. I don't think this has a check function, and then you can just say exploit. So what this will do is it'll go through and it'll use the SSH vulnerability to check and see if any of the username and passwords are in our machine. Because again, our point right now is to try to find all user access so that we can be able to log in. And then once we find user access, we're going to escalate those privileges to be able to get administrator privileges. So you'll find that, you know, if we ran this just for root, that we could immediately get the root password because, you know, it's the way we set it up. But I just want to show you the process for how you go about, you know, if you didn't already set the machine up for you, how you would find the user account, how you would then use that to get gain your increase your escalate your privileges, and then be able to you know, go through the rest of the process. So this takes a little bit to run. Any questions while we're waiting for this? No questions? Are you guys still there? Yeah, okay. Cool, thank you. All right, so we did that and we have success. We found out that there is a user account on this machine that's called user. with a password of OWASP BWA. Okay, so we can confirm that by coming over here to another terminal, and we can say SSH into user at 10.0.2.14, which is our broken web app machine. It wants to know what our password is. It just told us that it was OWASP BWA. And then if we say, who am I? We now have user access to this machine. Okay, so that's the first part of the process. We've gained access to the machine. So now if I wanted to, I could go and look and see what's on this machine, be able to access the various things, whatever this user has privileges to, I can be able to access. Okay, so that's the first part. So now that we have the user, I think I'm going to show you a different way to be able to do that. Okay, we're going to do the same type of thing, but we're going to do it with Hydra instead. Okay, so I have my user pass already. It's set up. And you have to make sure that there is a space after the word user, which I think I did not do. So, so now I need to go through and update this. Hopefully this will work this time, we'll see. But the purpose of this is we want to get rid of the word user and the space. So I'm going to exit out of Metasploit. Or is it by? Oh, exit -y. So again, we have a whole bunch of username and passwords. What we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the word user because Metasploit is set up to use both the user separated by a password on the command line, but Hydra just wants the password. So I'm just going to repurpose the same password list. I'm going to go through and replace all of the user space. So all of these say user space something, and then hopefully I'll just be left with the password. And hopefully this will work, and it's still not working. So I'm just going to go into VI again and do the same thing. So VI user pass colon %s slash user space slash, I don't want to do it globally. So it did that colon WQ. So if I just cat user pass now, I should just have my passwords. Okay, so perfect. All right, so now we're going to use Hydra to do the same thing. Okay, so excuse me. I'm going to, and again, we're doing this over SSH. So Hydra is just another tool that you can use. It's something you might see on your exam. It's going to, and we actually called this user pass .text, and we're going to try to tell Hydra to break in using the user count, and we want to try to use our dictionary list of passwords. So we're going to kick this off, and it says, hey, don't use this in military or secret organizations. But when it completes, which I think happens relatively quickly, we'll see, as in your write-up, that it provides you with the username and password also for the user. So in this case, I specified specifically that I wanted to do user. What you could do is to specify where I said user.l, you could actually just give it a list of usernames and just go through some of the common default usernames for Linux machines, okay? Because you'll see that most of them have the same types of usernames. So if we were to look, for example, we look in the shadow file, you'll see that most of these Linux machines have like the same types of user accounts, okay? So you've got a root, you've got a backup, you've got a daemon. So you'll see that, there's lists like dictionary lists that provide you with the list of common passwords depending on what type of machine it is. So if it's a Debian machine or if it's a Linux machine or whatever it is. So you'll see that our Hydra came back and it said, hey, we found that the password is user and the login is user and the password is OWASP BWA. Okay, so that's two different ways that you can go about gaining access to a machine. Okay, so these same types of processes and procedures you can use out in the real world, except hopefully they've changed the default passwords for the machines. But if they did, then I don't think that we'd probably be, still in business. So any questions so far about any of that? No? All right. So we're going to do the same thing, which is break into our broken web app machine, but we're going to do it this time using port 80. So the first port that we saw was port 22. The second port that was in our list of possible things that are open is port 80. So we're going to do some scanning to try to access via port 80. Oh, I'm typing into my Word document. All right, so we're going to just clear this so we have a clean slate to start with, and then we're going to launch MSF console again. So again, there are ways to do this without MSF console. It's just easier if you can use MSF console to be able to have the exploits, but you can get, for example, vulnerabilities for like a lot of web application vulnerabilities from like either exploit database, search exploit. There's a lot of different ways that you can go about getting the vulnerabilities, but we're just using Metasploit for ease of use for my evil purposes. But I have permission because it's my network. All right. So we're going to look for the version of the system that we have. So in this case, it is version number 2.2.14. If this was some other version, you could put that in here. You could say search, and we're saying specifically Apache 2.2.14. And it comes up with a list of a whole bunch of vulnerabilities that are available for Apache machines, okay? So we are going to use the one that says Tomcat Manager login, because we just want to get access to the machine. Let me just put this back over here so I can stop trying to find it in the light. All right, so you're going to say use, and then we're specifically using this Tomcat Manager. If you see what number it is, you can actually just say use the number, but I'm just going to say use this because I know that's the one I want. And again, we're going to say show options. And we'll see that it needs a lot of information. So specifically, it needs the brute force speed, which is already there. It needs the R host. So we're going to say set R host 10.0.2.14. And then we need, what's next? We've already got the port. Stop on success, we want to say true. So once we're able to log in, we don't need to keep going. And let me see if that's the username and password that Tomcat Manager default passwords. Yes, okay. So let me see if I can check this. It does not support checks, so I'm just going to exploit and see what happens. So it completed and it came back and it told us here at the end that it was able to log on with root and OWASP BWA. So again, I told it to stop on as soon as it found the password, any password, that username or password that works. So it did. If I did not tell it to stop on success, it would have kept going through the rest of the list. Okay. So now that's how you can get the root access. So we can be able to check that by saying SSH root at 10.0.2.14. And then we know OWASP BWA. And we say, who am I? And it tells us that we're in here as root. Okay, so as far as our ethical hacking process, we've escalated privileges so we can declare success. Okay, so if this were a real thing, then you'd want to, for example, add a backdoor so you can make sure that you get in later. And then you want to cover your tracks, which means go back in and get rid of any logs or any evidence that you had been here. So for example, I created a couple files to be able to run some things. You want to make sure that those files were removed. Okay, so that's how we do it through port 80. And let's see, we're going to escalate privileges with doing the same type of thing, but we're going to do it using port 22. through the SSH login. So again, I think we're doing this through MSF console. And we are on page 9 if you are following along. So we're going to say use the auxiliary scanner for SSH. So we can just say use auxiliary scanner for SSH. I'm going to say show options. And then again, we want to put in the R host. So set R host and 10.0.2.14. We're going to set the user pass file to the user pass file that we know is already on here. So it's in user share, and this is the same on everybody's Kali machine. So you have this as well. It's not something I staged. Metasploit, and then root username password. And we're going to again stop on success. And then show options, make sure we got everything. And it looks like we do. I don't think we want to see the verbose. Maybe we do. So set verbose to true. And then I'm going to just check. Some modules you can check, some of you can't. Just depends on how old they are. And otherwise, you can just say exploit. So as you can see, the verbose mode actually just shows you, try by try, whether or not it's able to log in. So just in the interest of time, I'm going to just say set verbose into false and exploit this again. And then it'll just show us when it comes up with the password. So again, this is just another way to be able to exploit. And then we've done this now with port 22 and then port 80, but there are a lot of different ways that you can do on this machine. So when this comes through, it'll give us the username and password for the root. And then on step 14, we're going to do the same thing, but it's going to be with Hydra. So and that's part of the reason why I use the smaller list. So if you don't have an idea of what the password is going to be, I would use something like, for example, like the RockU list, which has got like, hundreds, if not thousands of usernames and passwords in there. But that takes a long time and patience, neither of which I have. That's why we're just doing it with a smaller list. But all of these lists come default on your Kali machine. But what I think you should do if you are, in the habit of doing ethical hacking type things or penetration testing type things, is to make sure that you've got a good list, and you can, download a list from online, or you can start, as you are breaking into machines, using your own list. So like you can have, like, for example, a list of all of the passwords that have been used to crack things on Try Hack Me, for example. You can set up your own list. So it has finished. It came back and it told us that you can log in as root OWASP.bwa, which you've already shown using the other method. So we're going to exit here. And then I'm going to just show you how to do the same thing, but with Hydra, which is just, again, just one of the tools that you can use. And the command for Hydra is on your machine. Let me think. Oh, we need to get rid of, we could just use the one we just used, the user pass we just used. Let me just say cat user pass. Yeah, this is this password. We can use the same one for the root. So we can just say paste Hydra. This time we're specifically looking for the root account. Again, you can do this with a list of common Linux passwords. If not, you can just say what user you're specifically using it for. So like if you're doing, for example, Hack the Box, they want you to find the user account first and then put the flag for that and then do the root account. So you may have to do this. You just jump into root if it's easy. It's not always ideal. File for passwords not found. Oh, that's because I called it user pass. So it's going to attack our machine. So again, if this machine was well protected, if they had, for example, made it so like after a certain number of tries that, you get locked out or you get timed out or you get put on timeout or something like that, maybe this wouldn't work. But because we set up these home networks, we know that it does. So this is actually, hopefully going to work. So this will go through the same process. It just does it through like brute force without the use of Metasploit, so that you can go through. So sometimes, like for example, if you're doing an OSCP exam, you can only use MSF console Metasploit like one time over the course of the 20 boxes that they ask you to pop. So you need to find other creative ways to be able to deliver the same types of exploits. So again, it comes back and it says, hey, I was able to log in with root and the password UWASP BWA. So we have successfully been able to obtain both user accounts and root accounts for via ports 22 and port 80. So there are other, like I said, there's 9 other ports or 7 other ports that are open on the Broken Web App machine. So you can, do similar types of methods to be able to access, through other means as well. And I think that if you're planning on doing penetration testing or ethical hacking in the future, that you should get used to trying to find different ways to be able to achieve your means, just depending on what tools you have available. But yeah, so that's all I got for you. I thought this was going to take more time, but it did not. So any questions? No questions? All right. Well, that's all I have. So this was the week 16. These were the last 2 weeks of materials. So if you are getting ready to take your exam within the near future, I would definitely go back and you do some of the labs so that you can use some of the tools, particularly pay attention to HPing, ping, Nmap, the Nmap things, and then also like Wireshark filters, how those are, how those are used, how do you use those? Because those will be valuable for your exam as well. And all of the past slides, I will put up 16, the first part of this one, the non-ethics part, onto the website. The ethics is already up in a couple of minutes, so that you'll have all of the lecture materials. And then there's a couple more labs that you guys need to see, just as far as web applications. But the ones I put up there, for example, week 12, go through some of the options that are available for you on the web app. So specifically within Matilde, so that you can practice and understand what SQL injection looks like, what cross-site scripting, and some of the other OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities look like. So that information is up on the website for your hacking pleasure. All right, so that's all I have for you guys. If no one has any questions, then I will catch you guys in the Slack. No?
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, good night, guys.
Yeah, bye, good night.